Hey everybody, today I wanted to talk about levels of player affirmation in video games and why they're important as well. So first off, some definitions. So player affirmation is affirming slash encouraging, basically responding to a player's input. For example, pressing the X button and something happens. That's a level of player affirmation. And obviously that's going to be very important to video games because the whole strength of the medium of video games, or at least the biggest strength in my opinion, is that there's going to be direct player input when it comes to this type of storytelling. It's going to be very much a collaborative storytelling, much like D&D. And so I just kind of wanted to go over how I would categorize them on sort of 5 different tiers, ranging from, this does a little bit and pretty much every game should have some of this, to like very intense, like you're committing entire books and stuff to what a player decides to do. So like a good example of the first level of player affirmation would be something being reactive in the game. For example, in Skyrim, being able to pick up a bucket or something like that, or being able to break a box in Sly Cooper, right? That's affirming that the player can act and do something in that world. So that'd be like a simple layer 1 level of it. Level 2 would be something like NPC commentary on said action. So for example, like in Skyrim again, or any Elder Scrolls game, if you were stealing and then the NPCs would have commentary, hey, and be angry at you for stealing said thing, that's a way of affirming that the player is acting. It'd be kind of weird, if the player did something like broke somebody's stuff or stole right in front of them and then they just stood there and did nothing. It wouldn't feel like a reactive world. And so that's a great way of doing that. But obviously it could be for many things other than stealing. Like, I don't know, the player displays a power or is wearing certain gear or is found living in a certain area, etc., etc. And the NPCs can comment on that and make the player feel rewarded for doing an action. Or at least, even if not rewarded, like the world has responded to said action. A good example of what I would consider level 3 would be endgame title cards. So like Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 are great examples of this. You take certain decisions in the storyline, and at the end of the game, it details the effects of and consequences of your decision. New Vegas is also a great example of this. How it details the Wasteland and the Mojave in general, how it all turns out after who you side with and what faction you support and how do you go about doing that. That's a really good way of making the player feel like their input has an impact in the world and that it's their story. Or at least very much they took a part in this story with us, the developers. 4th level of that would be continuity of choice in subsequent games. So a good example of this would be just in Skyrim again. It's pretty canon, and a few NPCs will comment on it that, the Oblivion Gates were destroyed, Mehrunes Dagon was stopped, and that's a good thing. You should make, especially in games, following in the timeline, should make commentary on what has happened before. So it's like, everybody doesn't just forget what I did here. My input's only going to last for this one game. That's going to be all wiped away at the end of every single game. Witcher 3 is a really great way of doing that. You can even select to simulate previous game save, and they will comment on your choices that you made from the previous game, which is awesome. And then 5th, and probably the biggest that you could do, and I actually think Elder Scrolls should have done this rather than the whole dragon time warp thing at the end of Daggerfall, is make an entirely new timeline dedicated to the effects of a player action. So a famous example of this would be Zelda. You don't get the choice to, but there are different timelines depending on if hypothetically Ganon was defeated as Child Link, Adult Link, or if Ganon won. And making entire timelines to the player action, I think, is very impactful. I think for Daggerfall, they actually should have done it because I'm pretty sure if you do the math, the amount of endings and the amount of provinces there are on Tamriel that they would have had left to explore still are the same. So in other words, for each ending, the Wayrest, Daggerfall, Sentinel, Underking, King of Worms, Empire, etc., etc., you could actually like have each one of those different endings be the start of a province. So for example, I don't know, Scarab took part after Wayrest won and took over the Iliac Bay, and then Morrowind could start after the Underking got his soul back or whatever, you know, and stuff like that. So just a couple ideas that I had about player affirmation, something very integral to the medium of video games.